Now that the stock is dimensioned to both width and thickness, next I am marking off the ends, and I bring them over to my miter saw to cut them so that the ends are square and down to length. After cutting them on the miter saw, I bring them over to my shooting board and shoot the ends to make sure that they are perfectly square in both directions. And now I have both side pieces clamped together and in my Moxon vise, and I am going to be marking out the dovetails and cutting them on both pieces at the same time, or gang cutting. And I like to do that for a couple reasons, one of them being that it's quicker to cut both pieces than it is to cut each one individually. It's quicker to mark out, and I find that having the line marked across two pieces actually makes it a little bit easier for me to stay perfectly perpendicular to the face when I'm sawing them, and that helps because that's what you want in order to not get any gaps in your dovetails. I also like to sometimes mark out the depth for the tails based off of the board itself rather than setting a marking gauge to that same thickness. There's really no reason to do one or the other. I just kind of like doing it this way because then I can actually make sure that I have it set to the exact thickness of the piece instead of hoping I set my marking gauge correctly. So I just use a square to square that line across, which is another reason I like it, is because then I'm not relying on the end of my board being square despite my best efforts. And then I usually use a coping saw or a fret saw in this case to cut out most of the waste, and then I will come back with a chisel on each board and chop out the rest. The closer I cut to the actually marked out baseline, the easier this part is, as if it's close enough, I can just go straight into the marking knife line and chop out the waste. And I go about halfway through and then flip it over and come back for the other half just so I don't blow out one side when I'm trying to chop it out. And then with a piece clamped in my vise to help support the tail boards, I align them with my square and then mark out where the tails will be going into the pin board with my marking knife. I like to lightly mark out the depth of the pins or the sockets for the tails with the marking knife just so I can kind of get an idea of where I need to go down to, and then I mark the depth with a pencil and come back later to make a much more heavy marking knife line between the two pencil lines. And then, similar to before, I use my fret saw to saw out most of the waste and clean it up with the chisels. After a little test fitting and some adjustments being made with the chisels, I get the dovetail joint all assembled and with a nice tight fit. And it's a nice tight fit, and I'll do a little bit of planing just to clean it up a little and do the other three.